It's a topic that interests most of us.
It's at the heart of everything. Sexuality and spirituality are not two different things. They are the same life force.
So God endorses sex?
But it was God's idea in the first place. They created, for example, celibacy daily.
Daily, perfect. It's an exercise.
5 times a day. And carefully monitors whose penis is in whose vagina. Eve, your desire shall be to your husband, and he shall rule over you. That only means that he's going to be in a position to decide whether you have sex now or a couple of hours from now, depending on what he wants to do.
So it's up to male to be the one that is going after the female. I mean, we see that in nature
We're both supposed to go after each other.
Yes.
It says there, Eve is really going to go after Adam, and Adam is designed in such a way that he's going to be glad for that, and he's going to want to go after Eve. Well, that's good, but that was misinterpreted as though men are supposed to rule over women. Now, if people who think that would just go on and read the Bible, they would come eventually to Ephesians 5. In Ephesians 5, Paul says this dumb idea of headship that people got out of Genesis 3, that dumb idea is got to be thrown away. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Well, how did Christ love the church? He died for it.
Exactly.
He wasted himself on the church.
Yes.
Husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church. And then he turns to women, he says, women, love your husbands as the church loves Christ. Well, how does the church love Christ? Serves him, wants to emulate him, make sure his work is done, carries out his wishes. So what do you got there? You got Adam, who are humans, me, who am called to expend myself on my wife and for my family, and my wife, who is called to do everything she can to help me out and help me along.
So is that the point of contact, that when it's established between the male and the female that the sex should happen, when she feels she's being loved by him and he feels that she is part of me, she is mine, and her and I, we are in union, then the act of sex should take place?
That's right. That's the appropriate setting for it to be authentic, absolutely. And what Paul is describing there is not that one of us should be dominant over the other, either way, men over women or women over men, but rather he's describing a mutual servanthood, just like between Christ and the church. Christ serves the church, church serves Christ.
So
it's a wonderful metaphor.
And sensuality, hand in hand, create that perfect union.
Right, because we say, that there's a mystical union between Christ and the church. Nobody knows quite for sure what the world that means, this mystical union, but it's a great idea. That is, it expresses a mystery, which is the same mystery of love between a husband and a wife. A mystical kind of connection of the spirit and the mind and the soul and the inner self, a union.
Is that why the church is called the bride of Christ?
Exactly the case. Exactly. And Christ is called the bridegroom.
So it is that union that which you refer to as a mystical union that is supposed to take place between male and female when they come into that intimate contact.
And I want to emphasize what we mentioned earlier, and that is it doesn't take a marriage license for that. people who are living in a common law marriage are just as married as people with a marriage license.
That's going to raise a lot of eyebrows with the churches, with the way people think their morals should be. That no, that is not right. That's what they would say. But I do agree with what you're saying. If the moral codes are inside those two individuals strongly.
Yes, the authenticity of the relationship should determine the moral code.
Yes.
And people adhering to that should carefully protect and adhere to that code of commitment and authentic union. That would solve a great number of difficulties if we could move our society to that kind of genuineness and honesty and authenticity.
You called the story of Adam and Eve a myth. What do you mean by that?
I mean that they were never two individuals that lived sometime in history. They represent the symbolic idea of the original rise of the human race by God's creative act, but to assume that there was a person named Adam and a person named Eve as the parents of all humanity is not accurate. The word Adam in the Bible, Adam in Hebrew, means humankind. That is, means male and female, men and women. Adam means humanity. So God created humanity in his own image, male and female. The name Eva, or Eve, is apparently the earliest, or one of the earliest words for woman, and it only means woman. It's not the name of somebody. Now we name children Eve and we name children Adam, but in that biblical myth, it is simply a symbolic statement of womanhood and humankind.
And also, in my research and understanding different cultures and languages, I have come to know that Eve, it's called Ava. Ava has to do with the space. So it's a union between the earthly and the heavenly, meaning the woman, apart from being from the Adam, the male and the female, but it's going to be a union between the physical and the spiritual.
It makes it all the more wonderfully mysterious.
Yes, it does. Now, one last question. Did Adam and Eve make love before the fall or after the fall?
We don't know that for sure, but in the story, in the myth, it's interesting that once they disobey God by eating the fruit of the tree, suddenly they're aware of their sexuality.
The Bible says they found themselves naked.
Yeah.
You think that was also awareness of, that physical
That means
activity?
that they became aware of their sexuality. Before that, they hadn't noticed it.
So before
in the
that,
myth.
they were like one, sort of.
Yeah.
But now they were kind of separated. They needed to become one to feel that union.
Right. Another reason to call it a myth, because we know that this is an attempt to set up the picture in a certain way leading up to their realizing their sexuality. The best way to understand the story in Genesis 3 about living in the Garden of Eden and then being thrown out of the Garden of Eden is to realize that that's just a story of every human being moving from the naivete of childhood into the perplexity of adolescence.
And also from being just a material, physical being into a spiritual, higher being that is possible from the same body, the same mind, understanding as it grows into bigger, higher expansion.
That's right. Insofar as that is exactly what happens in pubescence and then in adolescence. From one point of view, adolescence is a very confusing and mixed up time for everybody. I wouldn't go back to my adolescence for anything in the world.
I wouldn't either. I'm so glad that's way beyond that behind me.
That was a terribly painful and dumb and confusing and clumsy time for me.
Insecurity.
Age 26, well, I might take that again, but not adolescence, And on the other hand, adolescence is a time of tremendous awakening. Well, that's the story in Genesis 3. Humanity awakening to its God-given destiny. Because remember, in the myth, in the story, after God excludes them from the garden, he comes to them, he sits down on the garden wall with them, puts his arm around both of them and says, well, now, let's see. We're at a little different place at this point, but the objective is the same. So let's figure out how we're going to move together to the same objective, namely the holy city, from the garden to the city, or the fulfillment of the divine kingdom, God's reign in all things coming. And the interesting thing about that is that God is not negative or cursing or anything like that. He's just describing the way things are. It's going to be hard work for you, Adam. It's going to be painful for you, Eve. It's just the way things are. Not because I'm cursing you and you're going to get it for what you did and you got it coming to you. That's bunk. That approach is bunk.
I totally agree with that.
God is not a God of vengeance.
No, God is, and the way even it's described to them, the way God clothes them, because now God kills an animal to clothe them with the skin of the animals, and preserves them from taking also from the tree of life. Right. Because if they remained in that state, can you imagine if you remain in this state that we are, forever and ever and ever? Yeah. I don't think we all want to do that.
God was saying, look, you're going to have a good time, you're going to have a bit of a struggle, but in the end, you're going to come home to me. So you're not going to stay permanently in the struggle.
So you're saying, even though we think there is judgment that awaits us, there's no judgment.
That's right. It's not about that at all. It's about God's wonderful grace and goodness to them, and the fact that God right there declares that he's going to walk the whole pilgrimage with them, and it's going to come out fine.
So the experiences that we have been given, and top it all with, enjoying our sexual, contact with the one that it's our love and our mate, is a God's gift to us.
God's gift. Furthermore, there's one footnote we might make on God's expressions about sex in the Bible, and that is there are some kinds of sex, 8 kinds of sex that God's against.
That's God's against 8 kinds of sex. We need to talk about that.
Yeah. He's against adultery, which is not really about sex, but it's about breaking a covenant. He's against child molestation. God's against sex with a corpse, sex with an animal. There are 8 things God is against in sex, all 8 of which we today in our society declare to be illegal. So, not a big deal. So people who say, well, religion and God, these are against sex, they just got the wrong idea.
How about homosexuality? Is that part of the 8 that God doesn't?
No. God does not declare God's self against homosexuality in the Bible.
Hold that thought. We hold homosexuality, that question, Dr. Allens, for the next program. It's been delightful to have you with us.
Thank you very much.